Right, so top tips: read the passage or the extract closely, identify clear and obvious answers. You don't need to analyze or explain your answer, simply state the facts. Okay, I'm going to ask for one volunteer, please. I'm looking for those hands going up. Who would like to read for us? Okay, we have Annie. Annie, please. Could you read this passage, please, Annie? It was fine open walking here upon the summit. Our way lay a little downhill, for, as I have said, the plateau lay tilted toward the west. The pines, great and small, grew wide apart, and even between the clumps of nutmeg and azalea, wide open spaces baked in the hot sunshine, striking as we did pretty near northwest across the island. We drew, on the one hand, ever nearer under the shoulders of the spyglass, and on the other looked ever wider over that western bay where I had once tossed and trembled in the coracle. So the question here is, how do you know that the crew are on high ground? And this is worth 1 mark, so you need to only make 1 point. So I'm going to give you a minute and a half, and then I'm going to give you a sample answer. Okay, and so you can give yourself a mark if you're pretty close to the sample answer. So 1.5 minutes to jot down your answer. You can share it in the chat if you like. 1.5 minutes. So we've got some good answers there in the chat. So how do you know that the crew are on high ground? So an example answer is, I know that the crew are on high ground because the text states that they were upon the summit, which means the highest point. It also says, as an additional point, but you don't have to make it, that they're way a little downhill, which means that they were coming down from a higher level. So thank you to those who popped your answer, Kingsley, Kushi, amongst others. Okay, the next passage. The first of the tall trees was reached, and by the bearing proved the wrong one. So with the second, the third rose nearly 200 feet into the air above a clump of underwood, a giant of a vegetable with a red column as big as a cottage, and a wide shadow around in which a company could have manoeuvred. It was conspicuous far to sea on both the east and west, and might have been entered as a sailing mark upon the chart. But it was not its size that now impressed my companions. It was the knowledge that £700,000 in gold lay somewhere buried below its spreading shadow. The thought of the money as they drew nearer swallowed up their previous terrors. Their eyes burned in their heads, their feet grew speedier and lighter. Their whole soul was bound up in that fortune, that whole lifetime of extravagance and pleasure that lay waiting for each of them. Okay, so what is noticeable about the third pine tree? And this is worth 3 marks. So 3 points, please. And as I said before, the answer is in the text. We're fact-finding here. So I'm going to give you about 4 minutes for this one. Okay, some really good answers there coming up in the chat there. Thank you very much. So if we have a look at the highlighted information here, we've got rose nearly 200 feet into the air, red column as big as a cottage, wide shadow, it was conspicuous. It was not the size that now impressed my companions. There was £700,000 in gold lay somewhere buried beneath its spreading shadow. So an example answer here is the third pine tree is 200 feet tall. That would be one mark and is described as a giant. So it's huge. Its trunk is as big as a cottage and throws a wide shadow, which shows the sheer size of the tree. And that is the second mark. However, the group are more interested in the fact that £700,000 lay beneath it. So that would be your third mark. So I believe we can now unmute. So I will ask one person, please, to volunteer to read. Have a look. Oh, they're all okay. Just looking for hands up. Grace, please. Could you unmute and could you read this passage, please?
Silver hobbled grunting on his crunch. His nostrils stood out and quivered. He cursed like a madman when the flies settled on his hot and shiny countenance. He plucked furiously at the line that held me to him, and from time to time turned his eyes upon me with a deadly look. Certainly he took no pains to hide his thoughts, and certainly I read them like a print. In the immediate nearness of the gold, all else had been forgotten. His promise and the doctor's warning were both things of the past, and I could no doubt that he hoped to seize upon the treasure, find and board the Hispaniola under the cover of night, cut every honest throat about that island, and sail away as he had first intended laden with crimes and riches.
Thank you very much. And the question is, what do you learn about Long John Silver's character from the passage? And this is worth 4 marks. So we need 4 points. And this is not about what he looks like. This is his character. Okay, so around about 4 to 5 minutes for this one. And if you could mute yourself again, please. Okay, so a sample answer, I've highlighted some things that you could use, but remember, you just need to pick 4. We learned that Long John Silver walks with a crutch. He's grumpy and moody. He cursed like a madman when he got angry. He's irritable, doesn't like the flies landing on him. He never hides his anger or annoyance. And we've got the quotation here to back that up. He took no pains to hide his thoughts. He is greedy, as the text states, that he hoped to seize upon the treasure and would cut every honest throat about that island in order to keep the treasure for himself. So what we have here is grumpy and moody, yeah, and we've got the evidence there. He's irritable, yeah, and he never hides his anger or annoyance. That's the third one. And he is greedy. So that's 4. Long John Silver walks with a crutch. Now, that's not about his character, so that would not achieve a mark. However, it has achieved 4 full marks because there are 4 separate details about his character. So that has actually achieved the marks.